All right, so we've got this really in-depth study someone sent us. It's called Agriculture in Pakistan, an in-depth strategic study. And honestly, just flipping through it, the thing that hits you right away is just how important agriculture is over there. It's not just food, right? We're talking like over a third of all the workers in Pakistan are doing something related to agriculture.
Mm.
And then, it's something like a fifth of their whole economy. It's huge.
Oh, absolutely. When you start digging in, you see it's way more complex than just, growing food.
Right.
It's all tied up with water, industry, like the whole social structure,
Yeah.
especially in the rural areas.
Yeah. This study, I mean, they really went all out. There's so much here, from the big irrigated areas to the places where it's all about rainfall. It's a lot to unpack. So
Nice.
maybe we should just start with what seems like the most basic thing, the Indus River. I mean, this whole Indus Basin irrigation system, it's mind-blowing, right?
The scale is just incredible. It's like the biggest irrigation network anywhere in the world, all connected, all these rivers feeding into it, the Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi.
The
Like,
Sutlej, even the Kabul River.
exactly, all coming together. And what's really interesting is how it all ends up mostly benefiting just Punjab and Sindh. They're the ones producing the majority of Pakistan's crops.
Like what? Wheat rice.
Wheat, rice for sure, cotton, sugarcane.
Right.
That's the core of their food supply and what they export. It's like 90% almost of Pakistan's agricultural output, all depending on this one system.
90%. That's wild. I mean, it's obviously super productive, but like you were saying before, it's also got to be risky, right?
Oh, yeah. There are some big concerns like, can it be sustained? The report dives into that. It's like you have this super productive system, but with some pretty serious problems built in. Is it even possible to fix them without messing with the output?
Good question. Like, what are the big issues they're facing?
Well, the study talks about, a lot of water being lost. The canals are old. A lot of them aren't lined, so water just seeps out. Then there's a problem with the soil getting too salty, which obviously isn't good for the plants. And in some places, the water's actually building up. Waterlogging, which also hurts the crops. The infrastructure, it's just old, a lot of it.
So given how important this system is, are they actually trying to do anything about these problems? They can't just ignore them, or...
Oh, no, definitely not. The study talks about how the government's trying to address it, like both at the national level with their national water policy and then different things happening in each province. They're working on lining those canals, to stop the leaks
Yeah.
and setting up these groups. They're called water user associations. It's basically people at the local level working together to manage the water better.
That makes sense.
It's all about making the whole system more efficient, using the water better, improving how they do things on the farms. It's called command area development.
I imagine that's a slow process, though, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's a huge area, and the problems are complicated. It's going to take time.
Okay, so we've got this huge irrigated area, but then there are also these, what are they called? The Barani regions? Rain-fed agriculture?
Right. Those are mostly in the north, in Punjab, especially on that Pothohar Plateau,
Oh, okay.
and some in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, KP, and Balochistan too. It's a completely different situation there. They're at the mercy of the monsoons. No big rivers, no fancy irrigation systems.
So it's much riskier, obviously.
Definitely. The yields are way less predictable because you never know how much rain you're going to get or when. And then, there's soil erosion, which makes things even worse over time.
Jeez. That's got to be tough for the people living there.
It is. It makes life really unpredictable, hard to plan ahead.
The study mentions livestock being important in these areas. Can you talk about that a little?
Oh, yeah, that's big, especially in the drier parts, like Balochistan and parts of KP. It's a way of life, really. Sheep, goats, cattle. These animals are crucial. And it's not just about local needs either. They're actually a pretty big part of Pakistan's economy. Exports of leather, meat, dairy products, it all adds up.
I wouldn't have thought of that.
But of course, they have their own set of problems, Overgrazing can be a problem, and the climate's changing, which affects the quality of the grazing land. It's a delicate balance.
So these rain-fed areas, they're not just facing problems with the weather, right? There are social and economic hurdles too, I imagine?
Absolutely. The study talks about that a lot. Lack of infrastructure is a big one. Bad roads, for example, make it hard to get products to market, and it's harder for farmers to access support services. And then there are deeper problems, like access to resources,
Right.
especially for women and landless laborers. They often lack secure rights to the land, and it's hard for them to get loans and things like that.
Yeah.
It's a cycle of poverty that's tough to break.
So we're seeing these big issues in these rain-fed regions, especially around infrastructure. But let's shift gears a bit. We were talking about the economy earlier. What about the agro-industry side? How does all of this link up with the bigger picture?
That's where things get really interesting. This is where you see how farming drives the rest of the economy. Take textiles, for example. It's Pakistan's biggest export, and it all starts with the cotton grown in those fields.
Mm.
From spinning the yarn to weaving the fabric to making clothes, it's a huge employer.
Yeah, makes sense.
Then there's sugar. Now, it's a controversial one because it uses a lot of water, but it's still a major industry, both on the farms and in the factories.
Mm.
And wheat, well, that's the staple food. The government really supports it to keep prices stable and make sure everyone has enough to eat.
Mm.
And then there's rice, especially basmati rice. That's a big export earner. And they could do even better if they focused on better branding and adding more value before exporting it.
It sounds like there's a lot of potential there, but also a lot of room for improvement.
Oh, absolutely. The study highlights that. For instance, they talk about the cotton ginning process not always being great, which hurts the quality of the cotton,
Mm-hmm.
and that has a knock-on effect throughout the whole textile industry.
Hmm.
And like we said, sugar production uses a ton of water, which is a concern, especially with water becoming scarcer.
Hmm.
And even with fruits, they grow mangoes, citrus, dates, quinoa, all sorts. A lot of it just goes bad before it can be sold. They need better infrastructure like cold storage to avoid that waste.
Right, right.
What's interesting, though, is that they're starting to look at these higher value crops, things like flowers and medicinal plants. That could be a good way to tap into some more specialized markets.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, the study does a SWOT analysis, breaking down the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. That's helpful, right? It gives you a clear overview. So strengths first, what's going well?
Well, a lot of it builds on what we've been talking about, that Indus Basin irrigation system, even with the problems, is a huge plus. They can grow a lot of food,
Mm.
and the land itself is good in a lot of places. They've got fertile soils and can grow a diverse range of crops.
Mm.
They've also got a strong textile industry, so there's a ready market for their cotton.
Mm-hmm.
And the study points out that they have a young population, many of whom are pretty tech-savvy, which could be a big advantage moving forward.
Well, yeah, for sure.
And geographically, Pakistan's in a good spot for trading with their neighbors.
Yeah.
Lots of potential there.
Okay, so those are the good points. But what about the weaknesses, the challenges? What are the big ones?
Well, we already talked about the water mismanagement and the aging irrigation infrastructure. That's a big one. Then there's the issue of land ownership. Farms are often split up into small pieces when they're inherited, and there are still some areas where these old feudal-style land systems are in place. That makes it hard to modernize.
Yeah.
A lot of farmers, especially smaller ones, haven't really adopted modern techniques, and the services that help them, like agricultural extension services, are under-resourced.
Yeah.
And of course, there's climate change, which is a growing threat. More floods, higher temperatures, it's all affecting how much food they can grow.
Hmm.
And then there's the problem of food going bad after harvest and not adding enough value to their products before exporting them. Plus, the government systems aren't always that efficient. There are overlaps and sometimes corruption, which slows things down.
So it's kind of a mix, right? Huge potential, but also a lot holding them back.
Exactly. It's a complicated picture.
So where are the opportunities? Where can things improve?
The study focuses on a few key things. One is climate-smart agriculture. Investing in technologies that save water and developing drought-resistant crops, that's essential. And there's a lot of room to grow in agribusiness and strengthening those value chains, especially with more and more people moving to the cities and demanding higher quality food.
Right.
Technology is a big one. Things like precision farming, using drones and sensors, that can make a huge difference in efficiency. And being part of projects like CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, that can open up new markets for their products.
Hmm.
And they need to encourage young people to get involved in agriculture, maybe start their own businesses. And of course, they need better policies and better coordination between different parts of the government.
It sounds like they've got a lot to work with, but also a lot to overcome.
That's a good way to put it.
So what about the threats? What could make things worse?
The big one is climate change. More floods, longer droughts, the glaciers melting up north. It's all a direct threat to agriculture and the infrastructure they depend on. And water scarcity, that's a major concern. They could be facing extreme shortages very soon. And there's always the risk of conflict and instability in the region, which can disrupt everything. And the global markets are unpredictable. Prices can fluctuate wildly, which makes it tough for farmers. And then there's the population growth. More people means more mouths to feed, but also more pressure on resources and more people moving to the cities, which could mean fewer people working on the farms.
Right. It's a lot to juggle.
It is. And then on top of that, if you have corruption and inconsistent policies, it makes it hard to make progress even if you have the right ideas.
Okay, so big picture stuff. But the study also looks at some real-world examples, right? To see how this all plays out in practice.
Yeah, they had these case studies, which are really interesting. For example, in Punjab, they looked at some wheat farmers who are doing really well. They've adopted these modern techniques like laser land leveling, which uses water more efficiently, and they're using high-yield seeds. They're getting great harvests.
That's good to hear.
But then in Sindh, they have a different problem. The way they grow rice and wheat together is causing problems with waterlogging and salty soil. They're trying to develop salt-tolerant rice varieties, but it's a slow process.
Hmm.
And then in Balochistan, climate change is hitting their food orchards hard. Less water, hotter temperatures.
Uh-huh.
But they're experimenting with things like drip irrigation and building these dams to capture rainwater, which is showing some promise.
Interesting.
And in KP, they're combining livestock and maize farming, which seems to be working well. They have these farmer cooperatives that are providing support and access to microfinance, which is helping.
Oh, cool.
And it's interesting to see how people are doing urban farming in the cities using hydroponics. It's a way to grow food in a controlled environment using less water, and they can sell it for higher prices.
That's smart. So we've seen the problems, the potential, the examples. What's the plan? What are the big recommendations coming out of this study?
Well, they cover a lot, but some key themes stand out. Fixing the irrigation system is huge. Modernizing it, maybe charging for water based on how much is used, that would encourage people to use it more carefully.
Yeah.
They also need to deal with that land fragmentation issue, maybe encourage farmers to work together more in cooperatives. And those agricultural extension services need more support. They're the ones who help farmers adopt new techniques and access information.
Right.
Investing in research is crucial, figuring out better ways to farm, developing new crop varieties, and embracing climate-smart agriculture. That's a big one. And all these value chains, they need to be strengthened. Less waste after harvest, better processing, so they can get more value for their products. And access to finance, that's crucial, especially for small farmers. Things like microloans and insurance can make a big difference. And getting young people involved, that's the future, right?
Definitely.
And lastly, it all comes back to the government. They need to have better policies and work together better. It can't be a bunch of separate things. It all has to be coordinated.
It's a big task, but it sounds like they have a pretty good roadmap.
They do, but it's all about implementation, right?
Mhm.
Turning those plans into action.
So how do they actually propose to do all of this? It's not going to happen overnight, right?
Right. The study suggests a phased approach. So in the short term, they need to focus on the most urgent things. Maybe change some laws around land ownership, start some pilot projects to test out new ideas.
Makes sense.
Then, in the medium term, they can scale up those successful projects, invest in things like storage facilities and better roads, and make sure farmers can access financial tools like microinsurance. And in the long term, it's about building institutions that can manage all of this effectively, making agriculture more resilient to climate change, and developing those export markets.
And how do they know if it's working?
That's where monitoring and evaluation come in. They need to track key indicators like how much food is being produced, how efficiently they're using water, how much money farmers are making, and the social impact of all of this. That's how they can make sure they're on the right track.
So it's not just about economics, right? It's about people, especially women and young people. What does the study say about that?
It's a big focus. They talk about the specific problems women face, like not owning land, having restricted mobility, and doing a lot of unpaid work on the farm. And young people, they often lack the capital to get started and see more opportunities in the cities. So the study recommends some specific actions.
Like what?
Training for women in things like literacy, leadership, and technical skills. Making sure they can access financial services, and making sure they have a voice, that they're represented in farmer organizations and in government. For young people, it's about providing support to start businesses, making agriculture seem like a viable career option. And again, making sure they have a seat at the table.
So empowering people is a big part of this.
Absolutely. It's not just about technology and infrastructure. It's about making sure everyone benefits.
Okay, back to economics for a minute. What does the study say about the different agricultural markets?
They looked at wheat, rice, cotton, livestock, all the big ones. And one of the main takeaways is that they lose a lot of what they produce after harvest. And overall, they're not as productive as they could be. But there are opportunities too. More people living in cities means more demand for processed food. And there are big export markets out there, like the Middle East and China. But they need to improve their infrastructure, especially for storage and transportation. And they need to find ways to cut out the middlemen so farmers get a bigger share of the profits.
And what about those success stories? The study highlights some of the things that are working well, right?
Yeah, those are really inspiring. There's this women-run dairy cooperative in Punjab, for example. They've got access to milk chilling centers now, and it's made a huge difference in their incomes. It shows what can happen when women work together and have the right resources.
That's great.
And there's this agritech startup in Sindh that's doing amazing things with solar-powered irrigation and sensors. It's all about using technology to save water and increase yields. And in KP, they have this community-led project to manage water resources better. It's reducing erosion and helping them grow a wider variety of crops.
It sounds like there's a lot of innovation happening.
There is, and it shows that they're not just talking about solutions, they're actually putting them into practice.
But all of this takes money, right? What does the study say about financing?
They talk about a few things. The government has programs, of course, to fund infrastructure and provide support to farmers, but they also need private investment in things like agritech startups and bigger infrastructure projects. And there are international donors who are helping. But a big part of it is reducing risk. Things like crop insurance can make a big difference for farmers, so they're not afraid to invest.
And we can't forget about technology, right?
Yeah.
All those digital tools have a big role to play.
Huge. The study talks about precision farming, using drones and sensors to monitor crops and apply inputs more efficiently. And online platforms, those can help farmers access markets, get information, and cut out the middlemen. And blockchain, that can help track produce from farm to market, which builds trust and opens up new possibilities for exports.
So it's about using technology in a way that actually helps farmers on the ground.
Exactly. And they need to work together. Tech companies, research institutions, universities, they all have a role to play.
Okay, so we've covered a lot, but we can't forget about the environment and society, right? What does the study say about those aspects?
It emphasizes that development can't come at the expense of the environment. They need to address things like groundwater depletion, soil degradation, and deforestation. And they need to make sure that development is inclusive, that it benefits everyone in the community, and that vulnerable groups are protected.
So it's about striking a balance, right?
Exactly. It's about economic growth, but it also has to be sustainable and equitable. It has to benefit everyone.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive. It's clear that agriculture in Pakistan faces a lot of challenges.
Yeah, it's a complex situation.
But there's also so much potential, especially if they can get the water situation under control, adapt to climate change, and empower people on the ground.
Exactly. It's about investing in the right things, using technology wisely, and making sure everyone has a chance to participate.
So, given everything we've discussed, with water becoming so scarce, what do you think are the most innovative solutions they could implement? Not just for the big farms, but for all those smallholder farmers who are really the backbone of the sector. What will really make a difference in the long run, both for their food security and their economy?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There's no easy answer, but they need to think outside the box. Maybe it's about combining traditional knowledge with modern technology, or finding ways to make those rain-fed areas more productive. Or maybe it's about completely rethinking how they distribute and market food. It's going to take creativity and collaboration to find the solutions that work.
I guess we'll have to see what the future holds. But it's definitely a situation worth watching closely.
It is. It's a microcosm of the challenges facing agriculture globally, and the solutions they find could have implications far beyond Pakistan's borders.
It's been great discussing this with you. Thanks for joining me.
It's been my pleasure.
To our listeners, thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.
See you then.